want to save.
All right. Now that we got the garbage out of the way.
Actually, it's too bad we didn't capture that, because that would have been a nice sort of, hey, we're all real people here.
There's a lesson there. I truly believe there is, right?
Yep, absolutely. Always a lesson. Well, and I, have to expand my horizons a little bit. I've been in the house so much that I think, like I said, that everybody's on my time zone. Everybody's in my situation, right? It's just me and my little,
bubble.
My bubble, exactly.
That's right. We all feel that way, actually, really, literally.
Yeah, it's strange times.
It's very strange times indeed. Yeah, but there's a lot of blessings that come out of it. I totally believe that.
Oh, yeah.
It's been really good for us. My husband's a dentist. I'm not thrilled that he's back at work every day, but that in and of itself, there's a reason for it, right? So, yeah.
But I would think this would be a good time, actually, for companies to work on their branding, right? It's a great time to get focused and say, okay, here's some stuff we've put off for, ever. And now we actually have the time and the bandwidth to sort of focus on improving ourselves and, being more intentional with our branding. And
you're absolutely right. So that's what happened in March. It was more, the revolution started with people. I call it the revolution. In March, people started saying, well, it was mid-March. It was March 19th. So I was scheduled to have a paid program on Zoom, because we've been doing virtual programs on Zoom for 4 or 5 years because my client's global.
Yep.
And this all happened. And on March 18th, I just was laying there, and I had this in the morning, and I had this visualization, and I was like, I can't charge people for that class. And what do people need from me? And I was like, they need a lot of support given what I do. Because really the focus is on people's brands. Who are you? A brand is who is the person, right?
Right.
And that applies to professionals all the time, because we're always confused about how should we come across? What should we say? What should we do? How do we attract attention in the good way? How do we influence? How do we sell? How do we lead? It's all combined under this umbrella of the person's brand. And so I did a free webinar on March 20th. On March 18th, I turned it into free, and it was like 40 people in there, which overnight was like, and the Zoom thing was new for people. And it was all women professionals. And I was like, oh man, like you said, they're all trapped at home. They have their kids at home, and they have their spouses at home, and they're trying to run a business at home or work at home. And I thought, that old adage, if mama ain't happy, ain't no one happy.
That's
and up to then, women weren't my only audience. It was men as well. But I really realized that was super important. So yes, I've been busy, because really the structure of the programming is, who are you? And then how do we take that and unearth that and excavate that? And I open the portal. I just give them the access to the portal for them to figure out who they really are. And then they can take that and do whatever they want. But in this economy, in this time, it becomes paramount to figure that out. It always is, but now really important, because people are confused, and they're trying to make peace with it somehow, and they're trying to evolve as a result of the pandemic. And so it's a beautiful time, like you said, for that reflection, and because we're forced to look at it. So I'm happy about it, and it works.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I know a lot of people, when they interview people, they have like questions that they ask, and we can go there. I have some questions, but I like this, if you're okay with it. I just
I do this too.
Wander a little bit. So we started talking about the branding and who people are, and how do you go about tapping? I mean, we all probably think we know who we are, but how do you communicate that? How do you help people to like go inside and figure out what of them needs to shine? And
well, so I used to be a securities lawyer. I did that for 14 years very successfully in Washington, D.C. and here in Southern California. And as I was practicing securities law, and I had some high profile jobs, I never really thought I was making a difference, but I always wondered, isn't there something more to life? There's got to be something more. And when I would ask people, they would look at me like, why are you asking that stupid question? And I was like, okay, I guess it is a stupid question, because no one wanted to engage with me.
Yeah.
So I stopped asking that question, but the premise always stayed with me. Isn't there more to life? And then when I switched careers, I burnt out of the practice. I had spent 15 hours one day drafting a little part of a mutual fund prospectus. at work. I went home that night to my lovely home in Newport Beach all by myself because I was single, and I opened my mailbox and there just happened to be my own prospectus, and I reflexively threw it away because no one reads that stuff. That was my aha moment that, oh my God, what I was doing was not why I had gone to law school. I'd gone to law school to really make a difference, and this wasn't it. So I quit cold turkey 2 years before the recession. I founded the second career on that premise that we all have something we're naturally good at, and we all have a purpose, and we all matter. And so we should shine as a result of it. And as I teach this stuff, and as I figured it out over 7 painful years for myself, I put it into a program for people. But what I learned as I was learning all this painful material was that we're all afraid, as Marianne Williamson so beautifully says in her book, A Return to Love, of our light, of our greatness. So when I work with clients, I am 100% sure everyone has something they're fantastic at, and everyone has real richness in something that would be of value to others. And so I see that already in people. That's just my natural talent. So we look for people's natural talent. What is that one thing you're really naturally good at and that you do every day and you think the rest of us do it too? It's like breathing. Let's find that, because the premise of everything is, do you emotionally resonate with me? That is the only reason your brand sells. 78% of everything you and I buy is not based on content. It's based on how you make me feel, okay? So I'm not buying real estate because of the realtor. I'm buying it because I like that real estate agent, or I like the commercial real estate agent. So the only emotion that sells is happiness. Do you make me happier in the moment? A degree happier. I'm not looking for a clown or a cheerleader. I'm looking for someone that can make me feel happier than the moment before I was with them. I will pay them. I will hire them. And so that natural talent component allows that happiness, allows us to find our own happiness, right? Because you can't make, as a brand, you can't make your clients or your prospective clients happier in order for them to notice you, hire you, want you, if you're not already showing up some version of happy, right?
Right.
So, and we're also mired in stuff, external stuff. And it makes sense, right? Especially with COVID these days. People are worried, they're concerned, legitimate, all legitimate. However, they all have the control. And that's what I am a champion of. You have the control, you have the power. Nothing external should be able to rock that. Even though I have my many bad days, right? I mean, I am learning as I go, truly. I just usually 3 or 4 steps ahead of my clients because I see that greatness in them, right? And I have coaches that see the greatness in me that keep me going. We all need that accountability. So what are you naturally good at? That really puts people in that place of ownership. And then how do we bring it to light? What is your story? People have beautiful stories. Just yesterday, I read 2 stories from 2 clients in my branding boot camp. These stories were like, they're all lawyers, this group of boot campers. But these stories are so poignant and so rich. And every one of them is like that. So I always tell everyone, I wish you could sit in my shoes, having read thousands and thousands of stories over 12 years, because I'm the only one that reads them. It's confidential. I take them to my grave with me. But you would see people differently. You would appreciate them differently. You would cut them slack differently. You would just rejoice in who they are because of what they've gone through and how it's been. And so that's a huge part of people figuring out who they are. But the underlying current of all of this is based on my research that I did at UCLA with a neuroscientist 10 years ago. I found out there's a direct inverse correlation between stress and self-confidence. So as your everyday stressors go up, and boy, we've always had them, now we certainly do, your self-confidence proportionally starts to drop, even for the most self-confident people. So stress is going up, self-confidence is dropping, which means what? Which means our brand value isn't selling. But what that really means is that we're not emotionally resonating with our audience. No one is buying that anymore. So every aspect of my teachings is about boosting self-confidence and reducing that stress barrier, because that will allow people to really own, in air quotes, my favorite word, who they are, and then put it into action. And then there's so many tools we implement, like the natural talent, like this story, really having people hone in on their values. You know, I just did a webinar the other day for a national organization that is the largest legal software provider. And they asked what people wanted. And so many people said, I want to understand my values, which is new since the COVID-19, because people were not asking for that. They were more oriented towards, okay, how do I have a brand that sells me? And I was like reading this, and they were typing it into Zoom, and I was like, values, how fascinating, right? That's a big change, men and women.
Yeah,
So,
interesting.
and values is very important. And I can tell you why in a minute. I just feel like I should stop talking now because I keep talking.
It's true that I mean, I think this, I read this and I totally believe it, that we don't realize our own value. We don't realize, not our own value, but our own talents. It's almost like we think that everyone else has all of our talents plus their talents. So we think, oh, we just take them for granted. It's kind of, how do
It's true. It's
what
true.
makes us special,
Yeah.
talent.
Is that a question, or are you just making that as a statement? There's something that
Well,
makes you
I guess
special.
both. Yeah. I mean, how do you help people to discover what's special about them that, no, not everybody has this innate ability to do X, Y, Z.
So look, when I say natural talent, that's an excellent question. I'm not looking for them to turn it into a career like I did. So how this came about is I took a course from an ex-Harvard litigator when I was sitting around eating bonbons after I had retired at the ripe old age, 30 something, from the practice of law. And everybody thought I was crazy. I thought I was crazy. This is 2 years before the recession, but I knew I couldn't keep doing that because it was going to kill me. The stress of it was literally going to kill me.
Yeah.
But back then, no one was reinventing themselves. And in this class, this man really taught me the natural talent concept. He's brilliant, and I give him full credit every day. Curtis Adney, those people that come into your lives that really shape it,
Yeah.
and then they just disappear. But
Yeah.
always, forever, you hope to be that for someone, right?
Yeah.
I don't need to ever see you again necessarily, but if you can take that wisdom on and pass it on, and look what I've done with it. Anyway, so Curtis had us do the natural talent exercise, and I was like, well, I don't have anything. I like to get dressed in the morning. That's the most exciting part of my day. There's a whole set of questions, and there's 39 other people in the room, and I said, well, doesn't everybody else love to dress themselves? And they all said, no, we hate that. And I was like, here I am, like a 37-year-old person who's never heard this before. I was like, why not? And they're like, oh God, it's awful. You don't know what to wear. I'm like, oh, it's so much fun. The textures, the patterns, the colors, matching things. And then they taught me about stylists in Hollywood. I'd never heard of a stylist before. I felt like I was living under a rock. I'm like, people get paid to dress other people. That's so cool. So that's what led me to where I am. It turns out I'm not a stylist. Fundamentally, part of our program is what do you wear? Because that is based on the external brand, the billboard, and it boosts people's self-confidence. And it was started fundamentally by a man in one of my programs. So I'm getting somewhere with this.
Take your time.
So that's what led me to change my careers, but I'm not expecting everyone to do that. I'm just saying there's some component of your day that is so rich with that for you, with that joy for you. You must find it, because everything in my world is about an intentional plan. Do you have intentionality behind everything? So say you love cooking, and so many professionals love cooking. I am not one of them. They do.
Me neither.
Like, all right, well then juxtaposition that next to a tough activity you have coming up, work related, a tough meeting. Set yourself up for success. So what are those natural things people are good at? There's a whole proprietary assessment I give. There's so much dialogue that we have with clients as a result, but there are underlying nuances. They're not anything that you necessarily, not all those people turn into top chef, right? They don't have to. But again, it's a recognition that, hey, I have value, I have worth, I have power, I matter. And I can take this and serve a purpose in the world rather than just having a job, quote, right?
Yes.
And then, so that's when you asked initially, why do companies are doing this? Because I started them thinking like this. I'm like, your employees are humans. They bring their human to work every day. They've got to understand who they are and why they do what they do and how they fit into this machine of your organization. Otherwise, they cannot do their job well enough because there's no sense of purpose, there's no direction, there's no meaning. So when they do this organizationally with me, productivity goes up. Empowerment goes up, retention goes up tremendously, and leadership skills start to come out because everybody feels good and their stress is low and their self-confidence is higher. So self-confidence, I mean, a natural talent is one component of all this that we build up to. And I just hold that vision and open that portal because I can see you. I dived into your business. I could project out 5 years from now. That's my natural talent of where you should be, what you should be saying, what you should be doing, and how it will pay you dividends, who your target audience is, how you should market to them. All of this stuff just lines up for me. And I don't even have a marketing degree. I have a finance and an accounting degree and a law degree on top of it. So that's where the natural talent part of it comes in, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and like you say, that's what, when you're, I don't want to say exploiting your natural talent, but when you're developing it and using it on a daily basis, that you get fired up because you've got that, it's just
Feels
feeds on
good.
itself. It feeds on
Yes.
itself, right? It feels
Yes.
good. You're helping people, you're doing your thing, and other people feel like you're doing your thing, and you just become a big magnet for success.
Yes. And it's easy. When I was practicing law, there was never a day that was really easy, I have to say. I enjoyed it for a long time until I just didn't. But it was hard work. I really found it challenging. And I've yet to find a lawyer that says it's not challenging. It depends on the type of law, but still, this, you just know it's your natural talent because I'm in the flow. Like literally, the first couple of times it happens, I was in shock. I open my mouth and all the right stuff comes out. And I would be like, where'd that come from? Who said that, right? And then when I speak, I'm a professional public speaker, and Q&A is my favorite time. So my husband is a dentist. Sometimes at the beginning would sit in my audience and be like, I get so nervous at Q&A because you're not a marketing person and I don't know what you're doing up there. And I'm like, it's the best. I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth, but it's always the right answer. And it always works for people. So, that's another huge benefit, that it's just inspired divine communication I have with people, and it makes a difference for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're just the vessel, right?
That's right. That's right. People don't need to know. If you're spiritual, you know what that means. If you're not, don't worry about it. It's all good. It all gets you the same results.
Yeah, exactly. Just listen to what I say. So here's a total left field question, and I don't know if this all ties together, but I looked, so your company name is Puris Consulting. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, so I said, I wonder what that means. So I Googled it, and I found out that it's a puffy wheat cake in India.
Yes, it is.
It's a city in India, and you can use it in Scrabble. So those are the three important things.
I did not know the last two, believe it or not. And you can use it in Scrabble. So you asked me what that means?
I'm wondering where you got your name for your company.
So it's interesting. I toiled around with that a lot. So it started with the premise that I wanted an authentic business brand. And I wanted people to know that what they did with me was about finding the pureness of who they are and who they truly are. So I was looking for something with the word pure in it, and I couldn't find it. And so, being a good lawyer, I always consult and hire all lawyers because I really believe you do your job, I do my job. And my intellectual property lawyer said to me, you need to make up a fake name, because a fake name you can protect, but a real name, like a real world, it's very hard to protect intellectually. Yeah. I was like, So then I said, Puris. And so I just came up with it. And then I trademarked it. And then after the fact, I did my little research after the fact, and I found out all that stuff about it. So there you are. But for me, and I've several times, because we've iterated the brand, because that's what I teach. So we've gone through 4 brand iterations now. And I've thought about changing the name, but I never have. I just couldn't leave. It's changed from Puris this to Puris that, but it's always just been Puris. So, that's what it means. And so fundamentally, it's about the purity of who people are and bringing that to the world and getting them results in business, because shoot, it doesn't have to be so hard.
Well, originally I thought, I wonder if it's because you're from Iran, and I said, I wonder if it's an Iranian word, And I said, no, it's a puffy wheat cake. Okay, but no, I want to say though, I'm making fun, and I'm sorry, but when I read the name, I thought of purity, I thought of cleanliness.
You go. It works.
It gave me the right vision and image, and I just, so I think it's effective. I think it's a great name. I definitely wouldn't change it. I definitely wouldn't.
Good.
So one thing that I noticed about you in doing some research on you and now in speaking with you is what an excellent, clear communicator you are. Is that a big part of what's required for you to be good at what you do?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. because that's something I'm always working on. And I find I could do better just like everyone else. Um, yes, it's a huge part, right? So I run branding boot camp, as I've mentioned, and week 5 is about communication. So it all leads up. The first 3 weeks are about who are you, right? Fundamentally, before you can build this business brand, you have to have a healthy foundation, just like a house brand. So it has to be about who you are. Then week 4 becomes who's your audience? How do we figure out who your audience is, serving them, evolving your audience? And then week 5 becomes communicating who you are to your audience, verbally and non-verbally. So I find most breakdowns in organizations and in business period between client and person doing the service or prospective client is because of lack of communication. And it's because we don't know who we are, so we can't really express who we are well. Tonality, all of that comes into play. And as we work on it, people then become better because they've already now learned in week 1, 2, and 3 who they are, who their audience is. They've learned the traits of their audience. Now, how are you going to self-express towards that audience? Mm-hmm. And so communication is paramount. I used to run from communication because I was not raised in a household that was good at communication, right? We're refugees, immigrants, let's face it. My parents, I thank them tremendously, but it was just about getting by for a long time, right? It wasn't about all the fluffy stuff and thank yous and whatever. Although we were very politely raised, it just, communication fundamentally was not at its core what it should be, right? So yes, communication is tremendously important because I've got to get to know you. I've got to like you. Likability is critically important in brand development because there's so many people that do what you do. Real estate, in law, in financial services, in whatever. How do I distinguish that? It's the vibe I get from you, and then what you say after I've seen you and liked your vibe and I approach you. And that's all about heartfelt communication, as I'm learning. I truly believe during the pandemic in March, I really got it, that we all have a divine inside of us, whatever that means to you. You don't even have to be religious. You can be an atheist and believe that, that guides you in your principles. And when you communicate from that heart space of love, you can't fail. So my number one prep tool is before every meeting, and I didn't do it today, but I did actually take 5 minutes to ground myself. Usually I have a long morning routine, but this morning it was 5 minutes, and I thought, okay, God, this is all I got. Whatever it is, it's going to have to work, right? Because circumstances are what they are. And it just from what do I want people to know from the heart space, and how can I love them? And it's not mushy romantic love. It's caring, right?
Yeah.
And so that guides all communication. I truly believe it, verbal and nonverbal. So it's very important.
Yeah, and it can be difficult, I think, to tap into that at first when you haven't done it, right? When you're not accustomed to sort of being very authentic and saying exactly what's on your mind. Is first you might. And there's some processes right in the beginning. Maybe you just blurt out what's on your mind, and you end up sounding like cruel or whatever. And then later on, maybe you can. But
absolutely right. Yeah, it all takes practice. It's like yoga. It's like meditation. It's a practice. Communication is a practice. Yeah. It also means though working on yourself. So I am constantly working on myself. Right. I have a lot to learn. They say you teach what you're learning and then some, and I truly believe it. So if you don't work on it, how are you going to get better communication, right? So every aspect of it, writing, like I have my 3rd book, and I hired a new copy editor, and I thought she was just a copy editor, but she's really fundamentally getting me to think and express differently, right? So everything is about expression and communication. And I think one of the best ways to learn good communication is to start writing a book. People, when they write, they learn to express. And the other thing that's important is I am here to help people access that portal into who they are. It is because I help them access their right creative brain. as professionals, we're all trapped in our left linear brain all day, every day. A plus B equals C, right? And that access point does not allow us to create brands that are authentic and attract people and are emotionally resonant, right, with our audience. We don't know how to emote. That's why we don't communicate, because we're afraid to emote, right? Showing emotions. And so when I guide people to access the right creative brains, that allows them to self-express better and really figure out who they are, back to your first question. And then from there, their creativity becomes exponential and they feel good. Self-confidence goes up, stress goes down. And then they're able to actually then generate that brand that is communicated well to their audience, sometimes without themselves even knowing how that happened. Like, it's like they'll come and they'll go, guess what happened? And I'm like, and I used to say, oh, that's nice. And they would be like, I wonder how that happened. And I'm like, do they not know it's because of our work? So about 5 years ago, I stopped being shy about it. I'm like, it's because we did this, and this. What did you think? So it sneaks up on people. Sneaks up on people, yeah.
When you touched on this a little bit, tapping into that right creative brain, that's like your imagination, right? You're bringing out your creativity and your, so how can people grow? First of all, when you talk about the power of your imagination, how that.
So one of my girlfriends said that many years ago to me. She said, the power of the imagination as an adult is unbelievable. Try it. And I listen to everyone, right? I think the universe speaks to people loud and clear. So I'm always one of those people that's curious. So I tell people, stay curious, right? Curiosity drives out judgment and allows you to really learn. So I started playing around with that, when we're children. And I have a Katys TV episode. If people get on my website, Puris Consulting, because I have two websites, katygoshtasbi.com and purisconsulting.com. If you go to purisconsulting.com and you go under Katys TV, I have a whole episode on imagination. When we're children, we tap into our imagination all the time. But as we grow, people are like, well, don't sit there and daydream. Don't be silly, But it really is, now we call it as adults, visualization. But I like to use the real word, right? It's imagination, right? So sit there and just diddle in just what do you want to happen? Live in the future now, right? We're always living in the past. And it really traumatizes us because we're reliving and rehashing it. Oh, I'm so good at that. Let me tell you, I can rehash stuff from 1982 and have answers and have dialogues with that person. And why did you? It's nonsense, right? We all do it. But the key is self-awareness. Can you catch yourself? Okay, stop that. So that's piece number one. Back to visualization and imagination, though. What would it look like? Because as I've learned, and I'm sure you know, the mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not. It just generates the effect, which is you get what you think about, right? So if you think about all that stuff from a positive aspect, from what you want, I mean, you can literally, it's visceral. Like, I feel the emotion in my body. I do that. I even did that this morning, for, I think, 30 seconds. I just see it and what I want, and I feel the emotion of it. And it's like, woohoo, yay. It's Mike Dooley. I don't know if you know Mike Dooley. Mike Dooley taught the woohoo stuff, right? You go to tut.com, TUT.com, theuniversetalks.com. Mike Dooley's great. And so you can literally feel it. And from there, then, you can create whatever you want. So part of my work with my clients is, well, what's that going to look like when they write their story of the past? It's generally to clear out the gunk, right? They always say, I'm therapeutic. I'm not a therapist because I'm not a licensed therapist, but I'm therapeutic for sure, because that story they write clears out the gunk. But then after they're done writing that story, but from that story, we also get other things. Let me clarify. We get their elevator pitch, their tagline, the About You page on your website, all the communication that goes out in marketing pieces from their website to ads to targeted to their audience. But then I say, after we're done with all of that, we'll write your story going forward. What does that mean? I mean, write a page and a half of what your life's going to look like in a year and a half, and give me as much detail as you can. What table are you sitting at? What's the temperature in the room? Which direction are you facing? Are you flying first class? I mean, all that stuff. And people are like, I don't know how to do that. And I get it, because I didn't know how to do that. I was like shy, or I just couldn't, that muscle was so weak, right? So weak. That's how I look at it. So I'm constantly strengthening that muscle. And so what other things can you do? Color. You know, 12 years ago, I was like telling people to color, and coloring books weren't even out, the adult ones. So I wish I'd invested in the adult coloring book market. Now they're at the end of every grocery store aisle. So put your mask on and go to the grocery store. And maybe we should keep this evergreen, but you know, it is what it is. Who knows how long we'll be wearing masks. But get yourself an adult coloring book and just color. So before I do any writing, I color. 30 seconds. If you don't have a coloring book, great. Take a piece of paper and a highlighter, just as long as there's color to it, and doodle. Stimulate that right creative brain. And that's the easiest way to do it. There's all sorts of other ways, like creative writing assignments, hobbies, things like that. But just color, and don't think of it as silly. Don't think of it as being a child. Don't think of imagination as being a child. Reframe that for yourself and see the results. It's true.
Interesting. I've been through that process of, book writing, and it's so easy to get so cerebral, but it's true. Like I think Ernest Hemingway was like, he had to write it all longhand. And I found that when I do that, it's just better. When I do it on the computer, I can do my editing on the computer, but when I do the whole thing on the computer, all I do is edit, right? All I do is like go back, oh, that sentence is no good, right? It has to be perfect before it gets on the computer. No, I write it out longhand, and then that just allows the ideas to flow. I can always edit it later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something about this connection of the hand and the mind and the heart, really, that's very powerful. Yeah.
Interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit, because looking at your history, how you sort of, came to be where you are, and it was a kind of a rocky journey. And it just made me think about endings and beginnings. You know what I mean? Like, we have this situation, and then for whatever reason, maybe it's dramatic, maybe it's just sort of withered, and then that died, and that brought us to a new beginning. And I think that's really important now to talk about. I mean, I want to talk about your specific journey, but also to kind of open it up a little bit, because so many people have things ending right now, right? Maybe their job, maybe their, sometimes being home with somebody 24/7 makes you realize that you don't like them as much as you thought you did. Or, like there are a lot of things that are evolving and changing that might feel like a death, but actually,
It's a rebirth.
It's a rebirth. Yeah. Can you just chat about first of all, tell us about your journey, because it's a fascinating journey.
So yeah, so we're from Iran originally, and in '79, because of the revolution, and we're not Muslim, we had to leave the country. But we thought we were leaving for 2 weeks, so we packed 2 suitcases and went to Indiana, to the Midwest, where my mom's brothers lived, and we never went back. So talk about dealing with change. I call myself a change expert, and I truly am, because that was the start of it, right? Just adapting, right? And that's what good brands do. They flex, they change, they adapt. And so I got to grow up in the Midwest in Indiana, and it was a wonderful upbringing, great people. But I was picked on because I didn't look like everybody else, and the kids were mean, and it was tough because it was hard to adjust and acclimate. Now, as a 6-year-old, it's way easier. So I always have real respect for my parents for having to literally, like, they were well off in Iran. They left their homes, they left everything. My grandparents, it was tough. But they did it because they wanted a better life for us and for themselves, I hope. And so I always wanted to save the world by being a lawyer. I thought that's how I was going to save the world. And so most of my audiences, I allow them to laugh when I say that, because it's kind of funny. But I got to actually do that. I got to make a dent somewhere doing that. I was a lobbyist on Capitol Hill, and then I was at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission when Enron blew up, for those who are old enough to know what Enron is. Then I was at a major law firm. Then I was in-house, where, as I shared, I just couldn't do it anymore. My gastroenterologist said, "You're going to die of stress in this job." I was in a toxic work environment. I just didn't know it because I thought that was normal. But what had happened was I was just so tired of that life. I couldn't even get up in the morning, and I lived across the street from work, like literally, like it was a 5-minute drive. I just, here I am. I'm like, I'm a workhorse. Like, I get it done. I get up at 5:30. I work out. I get it done. I've always been that way, and it's partly my immigrant refugee and partly just who I am. But I would just find myself, I was laying in bed, like just staring at the ceiling, 8:45, I drag in at 9:15, ludicrous, right? Because I'm a morning person. And so I just quit. I quit because I couldn't handle the toxicity of the work environment anymore. And it was the best thing I've ever done. And so I sat around twiddling my thumb, and I could tell the recession was coming because, again, that's what I'm good at. I can forecast the future. And I was like, people are going to have to start relying on themselves. This brand, people say I work for IBM, I work for Dell, I work for Apple. It ain't gonna fly anymore, right? Because professionals, also mostly lawyers, because that was my world, lawyers would call me up and go, I have no business, I lost my job. No one was used to that, right? And I'm like, well, what are you doing differently? I don't know. What am I supposed to do something differently? And I was like, wow, like we really, as professionals. And then I realized we're not taught that in school, right? My husband's a dentist. So when he got his new dental office, it was right around that time. Great time to open a new business. That's what we did, 2 new businesses during the recession. I looked at him and I said, you don't know how to get butts in seats to save their lives by saving their teeth. And he said, we're never taught that in dental school. And he'd been practicing a long time since then. So I thought, what a tragedy that in professional education, they do not teach us any aspect of this. They give us a lot of substantive left brain linear information that we do need, but they don't tell us, hey, now you're going to have to find people that you can apply this to and make a living and pay off all this debt you owe us, right?
Exactly.
If we want to get kind of, rigid about it. So I said, I've got to do this. This was not what I was really good at, self-marketing, self-promotion. But self-promotion is when I care about you. That's healthy self-promotion. And so I can tell you, look, I'm really good at what I do. If you need this, please consider hiring me because it will help you do A, B, and C versus what every professional thinks that it's bragging. Bragging is when I tell you I'm good at it just because I don't care about you. I just want your money. I just want you to listen. I just want to make myself feel better, bolster my ego versus my self-esteem, my healthy self-esteem. So we're never taught that. And as professionals, I think we go to school because we don't want to address that. And then we come out, and now after the recession, people really saw that, oh, shoot, I have to really focus on this. So that was my journey. It was one heck of an evolution, let me tell you, my friend, because I always thought I was a lawyer. I couldn't understand that I was a human. And I remember the day my sister was like, oh my God, you're not a lawyer, you're a person. And I was like, holy bananas, I am a person, right? And so, because in DC, when you went out and you saw people, the first question people asked was, what do you do? No one really asked you, who are you? What's your name? What's your family about? Nothing. That was just not part of the conversation. There was very kind people that meant well, but it was different worlds. So that's how this journey started. And it was complicated. And every day I'm peeling back this onion about myself and figuring out who I am so that I can bring the best of it to my clients through whatever medium. So that's my story.
Yeah, beautiful. It's interesting. You touched on 2 things that I want to talk a little bit more about, but this is again a total detour because that's how we roll here. But we actually had a program a few weeks ago where we talked about discrimination and racism specifically. But you're talking about discrimination, and I'm sure in Indiana there's not a huge amount of diversity, right?
No.
I mean, no. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. It's funny that you say that because it's becoming so highlighted in my programming. Growing up in Indiana, everybody looks the same except for me, right? And now there's a lot more diversity. I will say this though, there was a lot of kind people. I love Midwestern people. I love being a Midwesterner. Whether I go to Chicago or to Indiana, Midwestern people are kind. Like they would pray for us at church on Sundays. I mean, they were just nice people. But, with it comes all the nuances of being human. And in the Midwest, they were like, who are you? Why are you eating that food? And this is like 1980, 1979, 1980, like way before yogurt was cool. Like we were eating yogurt and people were like, what's yogurt? Like, like pomegranates. Oh my God, no one had discovered pomegranates for like 20 years afterward. So the basics for us were like unheard of, and it was tough. because I always stood out. And so you don't want to stand out when you're a young child or when you're even an adult. I look around and that's our problem. People want to blend in and stand out and sell somehow. And I'm like, those two do not go together. So I force people to bump up against their comfort zone. You know, and I say, okay, you want to be a remarkable agent. There's a lot of agents. It doesn't rely on anybody else except who you are at your core.
Right.
Look here first. And so for me, it was painful. I would get beaten up. I would get, teased. And you just kind of muddled through it, right? And it was painful. And so it hurts your self-esteem. It absolutely does.
Oh, yeah.
Here's what I've learned, though. I tell that story in all my audiences as a professional speaker. And I had a guy come up to me after one of my talks. And he was a white guy. And he said, I'd like to hire you for my company. Turned out he was CEO. And I said, okay, great. Tell me, what did I say up on stage that made sense for you? And he said, the fact that you're an immigrant and the discrimination aspect. And I said, I'm sorry, you just told me you're a white man from Nebraska. And he said, yes, but I've always felt like an outsider in my own skin, right? So discrimination happens on all levels. I think it's about who we fundamentally lack who we are, and then how discrimination happens when we turn it around because we're so scared and we fear that. And so we're going to pick on somebody else. That's what bullying and discrimination really is. And the implicit biases that go with that. Maybe I didn't like someone named Christine 10 years ago. So when I hear that name, it triggers it. And then I don't like people with that name. And I don't even know it, right? That's why self-awareness is so important. So a lot of my programming these days is going into organizations and teaching people, look, you want a healthy workforce that does not discriminate, that has diversity in it, that does not bring in implicit bias. Let the people develop their brands, and people will then have their own self-confidence to stand on. And so they won't be relegated to either being bullied, being discriminated, or thinking that they need to take their anger and their fear and their self-confusion about who they are out on other people. It doesn't have to be that way. And my programming is one avenue that really puts tools in people's toolbox so that they don't even go down that road because they're so focused on themselves and self-improvement. Everybody else can just live and let be, right? I mean, just do your own thing, stay in your own lane.
Right. If you're not looking for a scapegoat, you're not looking to make yourself feel better by making someone else feel bad. And then you just naturally, it's my favorite expression that I don't think I coined it, but I don't know who said it first, which is feed yourself first, right? You know, if you're, the way I think of it, like I'm out to dinner and, you know, you want to share your food with everyone at the table, but but if it's really delicious, you know, you really don't want them to have very much, right? So if you just like completely satisfy yourself and then you're like, oh, look, and I have some left over. Now you can give it so freely and so generously and everybody can have as much as they want. And I'll be like, oh God, look, that person took such a big piece of me, you know, like it just, you have to be whole first, and then whatever bubbles over, people can just take it, you know, it's just extra, please, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. That wholeness and that soundness is so important. And the whole, you know, airline cliche is so true. They say it because it's the truth. Cliches are said often because they're true, right? As Marianne Williamson says. So you got to be centered and grounded and know who you are before you can go in and actually interact with other people. And that's what I say. Everyday employees bring all this baggage to work, right? We all do. I did in that toxic work environment. I was part of the problem. I was not like, oh, this is awful, I must leave. I was part of that problem for sure, right? So we bring it and then we don't know what to do about it. And we blame other people because it's hard to look inside. And that's why I always tell all my clients are going from good to great. There's nothing wrong with them. They're going from great to greater maybe, but they're all courageous and they all have my admiration and my respect because they're willing to go through this process of unearthing and really accessing who they are. And they come out of it so happy at the end, even though the process might have been tough for them, because without that, then not being whole and sound, then you can't see the oneness in everyone else, that everyone else puts their pants on one leg at a time, as that cliche goes. And so what you do that might be harmful to another, you're harming yourself as a result, and you're harming this work environment. And by the way, no one's going to hire you or date you or whatever you're after. You know, my programs are about business, but they're about the person. So it's personal for sure. Right. So the discrimination effect is real, and I always say that, who was it most recently? Whatever happens, like there was some mass shooting somewhere. And I remember I turned to my husband and I said, that poor mass shooter. And my husband said, what do you mean? You know, and I said, I get it, you know, but that guy had to have such trauma, you know, and we just have to pray for people like that, because that's the problem, right? We don't, and we ostracize them, and we make the problem way worse, instead of saying this person's hurting too. And if they're hurting, then the rest of us are probably going to hurt, literally or figuratively, because everyone needs to be whole and healed, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I forget where I just read that. Someone said, same thing. It was someone had done something like bombing, shooting, something like that. And they put it on the teacher, saying that the teacher should have recognized that this child had no friends. And if they would have just introduced them to one person, if they could have just made one friend, that might have just changed their whole life, you know, because you do need to feel, I mean, you know, I'm thinking of your client, you know, this Nebraskan white guy who thinks like, I feel like I'm sorry. I want to go out on a limb here and say that all entrepreneurs, all people who grow up to be entrepreneurs, have always felt like outsiders, right? Because I feel the same way. I'm like, no one's like me. Everyone else is like, they're just doing their thing. And I'm just like, I don't want to do that thing, but I don't, you know, I'm different from everybody else. I mean, yeah.
I call myself the black sheep, but I wear it now with a badge of honor. I love being the black sheep because it makes me creative and it makes me see resources differently. But yes, we're very different. We think very differently. And I don't even know how many times my staff is like, you want to do what? And that's really why I don't have business partners. I'm happy to bring on people to work for me. And it's not because I have to be right, whatever. I just have this vision, and like, I'm happy to explain it to you, but I'm not going to sell you on it, because it may not make a whole lot of sense, but it works for me. And I will hire people to coach me and do this part of it and that part of it, because I recognize my weaknesses and I just want to focus on my strengths. But like, when I have a vision, like it may seem wonky and weird, like setting up this whole business. People were like, you're doing what? And then I remember when I took everything was already virtual for us, but like everything became like, I took a 7-month boot camp program. Okay. So boot camp has always been 7 months, virtual or in person. And it was $397 a person per class. And that price point worked for people. Okay. And then when all this happened, right, March 20th, I said, okay, can't do that. So we're going to turn it into a 7-week program, because people were saying, oh, I need this material. I need it faster.
Now,
And then I turned it to $97 a class, because I was like, this is what people need. And so I run it through my values. Is it fair? One of my biggest values is fairness, and it felt fair. So I did it. And my staff was like, did what? 7 weeks with $97? I said, they're like, that's like free. And I'm like, listen to me, it's going to work, because it came to me and it just makes sense, and people need this, and I don't feel bad about it, and we're going to do it. And it's always worked. And so now we've run 3 cycles already at that price point, and the next cycle starts in the end of August, and we've already got people enrolled in that. I'm like, you do know it's not till the end of August. They're like, yeah, we're just enrolling now. And I'm like, okay. So those things you can't explain to people, right? So that's really being a black sheep. And my staff was like, can't believe how you took a 7-month program, turned it into a 7-week program, same content, and you repriced it that lower, and then it sells. And I'm like, if I had a partner, trying to explain that to a business partner, right? Like, I'm not doing that, right? Because then you have to negotiate, and I'm just,
it takes so much energy trying to justify every decision. You know, you make these decisions, they feel right. I just want to do it and go with it. I don't want to spend all my energy explaining to you why it's such a fantastic idea, because then you doubt yourself, you know, like, well, maybe it isn't a fan. I mean, I'll forget it.
I'm good for advisors telling me the ups and the downs, and, you know, only an ignorant person wouldn't consult. However, some of the entrepreneurial visions are so wacky, you know, consultants who don't have that same capacity and that same vision would be like, I'm going to caution you against that because of all the business risk. And you're like, okay, thanks. You. And I'm going to take that under advisement. And, you know, then it ends up we're still doing it. So there's real beauty in being an entrepreneur and a black sheep. And so my family's kind of used to it now. Because when I became a lawyer, I did that because, you either became a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. I couldn't handle the sight of blood, and engineering bored me to death, right? Like, who becomes an engineer? Love all my engineer friends and clients out there, but not me.
It's a certain personality.
Yes, and it wasn't mine for sure, because I'm an extrovert personality. And so I was like, law it is. That's how I'm going to save the world. And so that all made sense. And the day I switched careers, my mom was like, well, I don't know how to tell my friends what my daughter does anymore. And I was like, so yeah, that's a problem, right? In your world, that's a problem. Yeah. But I love being wacky, and I love being what now people call me, and I'm sure they call you this too, is inspirational.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
They say, wow, you were so brave all those years ago. And I'm like, I think I was crazy, but okay. I'll take the compliment, right? I'll take the compliment.
Yeah.
But now they're like, you're so inspiring, that story, and how you're just so courageous. And I'm like, yeah, I'll own that for sure. And if that inspires others and lets them step into their courage to do something different, to feel good, that's how we grow. We're either growing or we're dying. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you start Katy GTV? Was that a vision?
Katy GTV. Yeah. So it's Katy. My mom.
Katy. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Katy Perry screwed it up. Spelled the same way. Her fault. So it's Katy. Katy GTV is because I've always known, and self-promotion, that I come across well in that medium of TV. People have always said that to me. And how I figured that out is, in person, when people are around me, their vibe goes up, the resonance is high. And so oftentimes they would leave and they'd be like, oh, I just lost it when I left. And I was like, So I can't be everywhere, right? So I thought, well, all right, I'm just going to make a TV show. And so these TV show episodes were a real labor of love, and they were expensive, and they were real labor of love content, and they're effective for people. And, we've stopped making them since, for obvious reasons, but the ones that we have a nice library. I watch on the back end when people tap in and get what they need out of it. So I love the fact that if I'm out there, that people can tap into that vibe and that resonance and raise their own vibe and get what they need, and then take it and do something good with it. So
nice. Yeah, it's fun. So what I was just gonna, there goes my microphone. My editor will take that out. Sound of dropping microphone. Okay, thank you. Get that out of there. What you talked earlier about books and learning, and what are you reading right now? What's happening in your library right now?
Yeah, I've got a hodgepodge of stuff. I'm reading The Dogs of Bedlam Park by John Katz. And that's because my editor said, I need you to read this book. My editor is my therapist now. It's really hilarious. So I'm reading that, and it's a fantastic book because I love dogs, and his writing is beautiful. He's a renowned writer. And that's nonfiction, but it has a fiction twist on it. So I like to read both, because the fiction stimulates my creative right mind, especially when I'm writing. Yeah. And I discovered, this is going to be funny, Harry Potter like last year. Because when I graduated from law school, I was not going to read a darn thing. And I looked at this thick book and I said, I don't care who it is, what it's about. I'm not reading another thing. So that's when it came out. So I just devoured those books because I was looking at the way J.K. Rowling writes and her creativity, and that's just divine. Like, you cannot make that up, right? Like, well, she made it up, but it's just
she just channeled it.
Oh my, she just channeled that stuff. So I'm always reading a fiction, but right now I don't have a fiction to read. Well, I do, but I'm supposed to read this book, and it's fantastic. And then I'm also reading Spirit Means Business by Alan Cohn. I love Alan Cohn. I don't know if you know Alan Cohn, but he really brings spirituality into business, and I just adore him. He's done a really nice job deciphering A Course in Miracles for people. So if you haven't heard of Alan Cohn, Google him, and A Course in Miracles Made Easy. And then I'm reading a book on grief, actually, by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler, who are the masters at grief and loss, because my mom is on hospice. And she's been on hospice for a while. And so I've figured I was going through the grieving process for a while, and on lockdown, you can't see her, and it's tough to
Yeah.
say the least. So a couple months ago, I thought, I'm going to read this book on grief and prep myself. And so I did, and she's still here, but I thought it felt really good to like be intentional about it rather than like just fall apart somewhere in
Yeah.
the process.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm reading right now. There's something else on my bedstand that I can't remember, but yeah.
Do you have one book that you come back to again and again?
Yeah, I have a book that I give all my clients as holiday gifts because I think giving books is such a gift. I love A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. I got to meet and got to know Marianne, and I just love that book. And it's a very powerful book. It's not a religious book at all, even though she cites Jesus because Marianne is Jewish. And of course, Miracles is her teachings. She didn't write it, but she teaches it. So, I always tell my clients, look, it says Jesus in there a lot, but it's not a religious book. And so that's a book I always return to because it makes sense. A return to love, right?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, Katy, what should I have asked you that I didn't ask you? Obviously, I should first have asked you, how do I pronounce your name correctly?
I guess that's the thing. That's it, right? So I guess I'll leave you with resources. That would be the only thing.
That'd be
You're
beautiful.
probably going to go there, right? So
yeah, and everything is going to be on the website. I'll put link, whatever you mention, I'm going to put a link to it on the website, which is getyourfillpodcast.com.
Yeah. So there's so much content, free content at purisconsulting.com and at katygoshtasbi.com. They can go to both places for free content. And if they want to dip their toe in the water and figure out what this stuff is about, I have an emotional resonance factor mini course. It's basically free. It's $29. And it's a self-paced course, 4 modules. We send you one a week. You watch the video, you get the handouts, you do the exercises. If you want to really practice a little bit and get the little bit of the fundamentals, that's why I made it specifically around the emotional resonance element of the brand, because that's the toughest part for people to get going on and gain mastery on. And then Branding Bootcamp, of course, starts at the end of August, and that's a 7-week program. And this next cycle is all professional women, and it's something of beauty to be a part of and to see, where professional women across the globe once a week come together for 2 hours for $97 a class, and they support one another and they get what they need and they grow together and they get this content, and then they go out there and they rock the business world. Because I find that as professional women, we don't make our voices be heard, and we don't ask for what we need, and we're juggling a lot and our stress is high. And so this cycle is just for professional women. And then we're going to do, before that launches, we're going to do 2 free webinars the week before to let people know, the 17th and the 19th. And it's just pure content, those 2 webinar series. So I will give you the links to all that. And whether you want to pay or you want to do the free stuff, it's all there for you to access. And I love it.
Beautiful.
People could use it.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure
You're
to meet
welcome.
you. I'm so happy
You as well.
woke up early to talk to me. I'm
Oh, it wasn't that early, but in my world, when you've had 3 hours of sleep, apparently it's early. We should probably give a backstory to that, but that's okay.
No, I should have started the recording earlier.
That's okay. That's okay. It rarely happens. And so, you roll with it. That's what life's about, right?
Exactly. Maybe
mothers can identify with that, not getting enough sleep at night. That wasn't my problem. All the mothers out there, was a dog. But, same thing. When people are in need, a being is in need, it nourishes your soul to take care of somebody else, right? Because someone one day took care of you, and someone one day may take care of you as well, right? There you go.
Absolutely. Well, I know this is not the last time I'll see you, but I just want to thank you so very much for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. You're lovely. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to stop the recording now.